So welcome to our Mothers Out Front Massachusetts Climate Action Call. My name is Diane Sokol. I'm a member of the Brookline chapter and part of the statewide Clean Heat, Clean Air campaign. For those who are not familiar with Mothers Out Front Climate Action Calls, in the next 45 minutes, you will learn about a specific climate issue and we will take focused action together. Today, we will be learning about how we can advocate at the state level to build our schools in Massachusetts to be cleaner, healthier, and more climate resilient. Here's a quick preview of the agenda for our climate action call. We'll start with a brief overview of today's focus. Next, we'll divide into breakout rooms just for a few minutes so we can connect with each other. Then we'll rejoin the main room to hear the background information about our topic today. We'll move on to our action. We've set aside about 15 minutes of this call to take action together online. We'll then come back together for a few important announcements and next steps. And we will end this meeting promptly at 12:45. We do hope you'll stay until the end. So a few Zoom norms for this meeting. Please rename yourself with your name, the organization you're with, and the location you're calling in from. Use the chat to share any comments or questions you may have during the call. And please mute yourself if you're not already muted when we are together in this main room. Closed captioning is available and you should be able to access that tool at the bottom of the screen. We're planning to go into breakout rooms in a few minutes. Unfortunately, closed captioning does not function in these breakout rooms. So if you need to remain in the main room to access closed captioning, please send a private message to our tech Deb Ashman in the chat, and she'll make sure to keep you in the main room. Finally, we are recording this climate action call and we'll be taking some screenshots later. So if you do not want to be seen in the recording, please use the Zoom controls to turn off your video. Today, we'll be taking a broad look at all of the public K-12 schools in communities across the Commonwealth. We will look at the climate needs of our existing school buildings, how they can adapt to our changing climate, and how they can mitigate further damage to our climate. We will look at the Massachusetts School Building Authority, known as the MSBA, and the role that they could take statewide in this work. We will discuss both state and federal funding that could make climate-focused upgrades to our schools more affordable and ensure that funding is available equitably. During our action time, we will post online letters to the state treasurer advocating for climate-friendly schools and spreading the action further through social media. But before we start the background presentation, we will take a few moments to connect in small breakout groups with others on this call. Please introduce yourself and the community that you are from and reflect on these questions. How are your local schools experiencing the impacts of climate change, maybe because of severe storms or extreme heat? What actions have your local schools taken? How can schools in other Mass communities take similar actions? Elena, can you put those questions in the chat? Make sure that everyone gets a chance to speak. When you see the 15-second countdown, use that time to wrap up your conversations, and you will automatically join the main room. Have a good time and see you in a few minutes.
Deb, do you want to pause the recording?
Okay, I think we're all back. Welcome back. Welcome back. I hope you had some good conversations. Joining us today from Amherst, Massachusetts is Sarah Ross. She's a co-founder of a national nonprofit organization, Undaunted K-12. Undaunted's mission is to support America's K-12 public schools to make an equitable transition to zero carbon emissions while preparing our youth to build a sustainable future in a rapidly changing climate. Sarah has spent the last decade working to accelerate the deployment of clean energy solutions, first solar on homes here in Massachusetts and then across the country. And now she works on advancing climate solutions in our schools. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Diane, and thank you to Mothers Out Front for having me here today. So thrilled to join you all. I'm really excited to talk with everyone here about the generational opportunity that we have right now to advance climate action in our schools. This work is near and dear to my heart for many reasons, but 4 of them are right here, my 2 children and my niece and nephew, all of whom attend public schools out here in beautiful Western Mass. So as a parent doing this work, and you can move on to the next slide, I've become very painfully and acutely aware that our school buildings today are heavily reliant on fossil fuels. Our schools here in Amherst, like the overwhelming majority of schools across the Commonwealth, are burning fossil fuels to keep our kids warm in the winter. As you can see here, back in 2016, the last time we inventoried our schools, 98% of them were reliant on fossil fuels. And with 186 million square feet of buildings across the Commonwealth, our K-12 schools are actually our largest form of public building space. So they're a huge part of our public sector greenhouse gas emissions. I'm also aware that these buildings are unprepared for extreme heat. I remember when my kids had their first day of school canceled because of extreme heat a few falls ago. And of course, the situation is even worse for schools that are located on heat islands, where temperatures can rise 5 or 10 degrees higher than the surrounding area. And that pattern of heat islands that we see in Massachusetts is, of course, connected to the historical practice of redlining, where banks systematically underinvested in communities of color. So these communities are particularly vulnerable to extreme heat and a high priority when we think about equitable access to cooling in our schools. So moving away from fossil fuels and embracing an all-electric solution like heat pumps can actually address both of these challenges. You've probably heard about using heat pumps to heat and cool your home or your apartment, but heat pumps can also be used for larger buildings like schools. Heat pumps, just as a quick primer, move heat rather than burning fossil fuels to make heat. This eliminates on-site combustion, which improves indoor and outdoor air quality. It also mitigates the safety concerns of using gas. Heat pumps are hyper efficient. An old gas boiler, even a new gas boiler that you buy today, the most efficient one might be 98% efficient. These ground source heat pumps can be 300 to 600% efficient. So really a hyper efficient machine for our schools to use. And importantly, they offer both clean heat and cooling with one piece of equipment. And we know when schools are equipped with cooling, this is going to be really important going forward, they can offer summertime educational or recreational programming. They can also serve as emergency cooling centers for seniors or other vulnerable populations. So transitioning schools off of fossil fuels and ensuring that all students have access to healthy school buildings is going to require a massive mobilization of resources. Lots of jobs will be created, and we're also going to be able to offer students learning opportunities about how buildings can be climate solutions. So this is really great work for us to be doing. So how are we going to get this done? In Massachusetts, and this is not the case in all states, we're really lucky because we have a state agency whose job it is to partner with communities to support educationally appropriate, flexible, sustainable, and cost-effective public schools, in their words. The agency has invested well over $16 billion into school buildings. You can click the next slide, and is responsible for about 63% of the money that as a state we put into our school buildings. So this includes kind of local funds. So they're really a really important part of how we invest in our school buildings. And just to be really clear, right, these are our sales tax dollars at work. So this is our money, of course, with all public funds. Next slide. So what does this state agency actually do? Well, historically, the MSBA, I'm going to use that acronym now, so has run 3 programs. First, it provides grants for communities to build new schools. And going forward, those buildings will all need to meet the new stretch code. This is hot off the presses. And that's great because the new stretch code encourages all electric, solar friendly construction. So that's great. If you move on to the next slide, but with such a small number of schools, you can see we only build about 15 new schools that they fund every year. We know we need a plan for our 1,800 existing school buildings, and especially those that are serving the most vulnerable communities. Specifically, we need to support those schools to become more resilient to climate change impacts like extreme heat. And we need to help our schools meet our state climate goals of reducing emissions by 50% by 2030, and to have a plan to reach net zero by 2050. So clearly we need to activate this state agency, the Massachusetts School Building Authority, in this important work. So where are we today? Well, today the agency's repair program that they have for existing buildings, it's currently on pause, but that program is actually only designed to fund new fossil fuel infrastructure. This is, of course, at odds with our climate goals and puts communities in a really tough spot. So we can just think about the recent experience of Lowell that you see pictured here. The Lowell School District really needed to replace some old heating systems in several schools. The city applied to the MSBA's program, the Accelerated Repair Program, and was approved to receive millions of dollars, badly needed dollars, to replace those old systems. But the funding was only for new gas boilers. When the announcement was made in March earlier this year, residents, school committee members, and city councilors expressed their dismay. They were stuck with 2 bad choices: either take the money from the state program for the new gas boilers at odds with their fossil-free future, as you see here, or forego the badly needed funding to replace those old heating systems. So clearly, instead of backing schools into a fossil fuel corner, the MSBA needs to update its program so that it is funding building upgrades that move schools closer to a healthy, clean energy future, instead of forcing them to double down on fossil fuels. We know this work is not easy. We know we need plans, right? That's why the state has been required to collect data and articulate plans, like our state 2050 decarbonization roadmap that shows us how we're going to meet our emission reduction goals through time. We need to compile that same type of plan for schools. And that was the thinking behind a provision in last year's climate bill called Green and Healthy Schools that Mothers Out Front supported. The provision called on this agency, the MSBA, to collect data on our current school buildings, something they haven't done since 2016, so that we can understand where we are today and use that data to plan and adequately resource a just, equitable, and rapid transition. Unfortunately, we haven't seen much action by the MSBA to comply with this law. And it's key that as advocates, we follow up on the policies that we help to pass and ensure that they're also implemented. And of course, now is the time to do this work. We know that we have a climate clock ticking. We know human health is at risk every day from air pollution, gas leaks, extreme heat. But now is also the time to do this work because there are unprecedented federal funds available to help us foot the bill, but only if we mobilize. the Inflation Reduction Act will defray the cost of new ground source heat pumps, the most efficient type of heat pump and a great match for schools, by up to 50%. These incentives are available for the next 10 years. They're not competitive like many grant programs. All of our schools are eligible, public, private, charter. In fact, if 300 schools in Massachusetts installed ground source heat pumps over the next decade, something we surely need to do to comply with our climate law, we would receive $1 billion in federal funds. And these incentives can be paired with new incentives from MassSave for heat pumps. So I love to talk about this example from my hometown of Amherst, where we're building, or lucky enough to be building, a new net zero school. The town expects to receive $3.8 million from these new federal funds, the Inflation Reduction Act, and another $1.6 million from MassSave, for a net cost of $5.8 million for this all-electric heat pump option for our schools. This is an amazing change in the economic landscape, if you go to the next slide, because if you see this, after incentives, the heat pump option, the best option, the healthiest option, is now expected to cost less than the more conventional gas alternative. That's an extraordinary change in the cost landscape for us to take advantage of. Okay, so who needs to hear from us all today? Who holds the power? Well, it's our treasurer, Deb Goldberg. She's the chair of the MSBA board, and her office actually oversees the work of the MSBA. I will note the legislature does have an important role to play in determining funding levels for the MSBA, and there are critical conversations happening in parallel about the adequacy of this agency's funding and the equitable distribution of funding. But today, we're going to ask the treasurer to advance the ball where she and the MSBA can. So we have 3 asks for the treasurer today. First, we're going to ask her to ensure that the MSBA has a program to support climate mitigation and adaptation in our existing school buildings. It's not okay that Lowell has to rely on a state program that only funds new gas boilers, while other wealthier communities like Andover and Arlington are self-funding electrification and air quality improvements in their school buildings. Second, we want the MSBA to use all the tools in its toolbox to help mobilize schools to take advantage of this great opportunity with the Inflation Reduction Act. We want that $1 billion of federal funds. And third, we want the MSBA to move rapidly to undertake those critical data collection efforts that we fought for in the last climate bill and that was signed into law by Governor Baker. So those are our 3 asks. Thank you so much for your attention today, for being here. This is a really potent moment for action. We know that the MSBA is looking at its programs now, especially this accelerated repair program that Lowell experienced. So your advocacy is really going to make a difference. And the last thing I'll say is, if you want to keep up to date on other advocacy opportunities specifically related to climate action in schools in Massachusetts, you can sign up for our Massachusetts newsletter. So that is all I have for you today, and I will pass it over to Anne, who will explain today's action.
Thank you, Sarah. Nice to see you all. Now it is time for action. Next slide. We have some very simple actions for everyone to take in the next 15 minutes. The instructions will be in a toolkit that we're about to share with you. First, we know the treasurer, Deb Goldberg, oversees the Massachusetts School Building Authority, as Sarah just told us. So what we're going to do is send her online comments, asking her to take the lead by instructing that authority to support existing school buildings to become more climate friendly. We'll use the public feedback section of her website, and a link to that website is in the toolkit. We have a template letter in the toolkit that you can copy and paste, add a subject line, and add a personal addition or 2, and then click submit. Super easy. Then finally, we want everybody to ask friends and family to do the same. And finally, we have template tweets and Facebook posts, so you can share this on social media. We hope that you share it widely. Imagine the impact if Treasurer Goldberg receives, say, 150 or 200 messages about this. And just a last note about posting to Facebook. We want Goldberg and the MSBA to see our posts. So to do this, you have to tag them in the post. And for those of you not that familiar with Facebook, like me, like I'm not either, the instructions for tagging somebody are written very clearly in the toolkit. So we hope you'll do that. Here is the action toolkit. Elena is putting this link into the chat so you can grab it. We've tested this out, so all the links should work. But if you should run into trouble, we're all going to be staying in the same Zoom room. Just call out, and Sarah and I will be there, and we'll be here to help you. For those of you who don't need help, we encourage you to turn your sign down so you're not distracted by anybody asking for help in any discussion going on in the main room, just for the few minutes while you complete your action. Next slide. Deb is going to drop the toolkit in the chat one more time to make sure you all see it. And now we're all going to be quiet for the next few minutes so we can take these actions together. Don't worry, you can call out if you need help. And if you really do get flummoxed, you will all get these instructions later by email today. So you can always finish up later, but we hope you'll do it right now. Now is the best time to do it. And we will see you back here at 12:40.
Okay, so I think we're at the end of our 15 minutes of action. We do want to grab a few quick screenshots of everyone. So be sure to smile, look at your camera and smile or wave. And if you don't want to be seen in the views, you can turn your camera off. And thank you, Deb, for restarting the recording. So we have our screenshots done already, Deb? I think Christine can put the slides back.
They're done.
Great, thanks. Christine can put the slides back up. Thank you. Next slide. Yep, there we go. So these calls, climate action calls, make me hopeful about our future. It's going to take a lot of people to tip the scales in favor of real climate solutions. But every month we build our movement a little bigger, a little stronger. We raise our voices a little louder, and a few more decision makers will sit up and listen. That is the power of our movement. So later today, you will receive a follow-up email. It will have all the links to the toolkit, to these slides, and to the recording of this call. We encourage you to forward that email to your network, especially all across the state,
Okay.
not only just friends in your communities. Tell your friends and neighbors about what you learned today and ask them to join us in taking action on this important topic. So Mothers Out Front hosts a welcome call each month. If you have asked yourself, what more could I do to stop climate change, then this is the right event for you. At this event, we work to help you identify the perfect role in our movement just for you. We want to help you find ways to use your unique talents, your skills, your interests, your experiences, all of that to build a stronger, more effective, and more inclusive movement for change. And we have one coming up, and that one will be Wednesday, July 12th at 6:30 p.m. So Elena will be putting that link into the chat. We will also be hosting an online get-together for people who live in cities and towns without Mothers Out Front chapters who want to feel more connected to our work. The meeting will be tomorrow night, Wednesday, June 28th from 7:30 to 8:30 in the evening. We'll share some of our successes, some of the projects we're working on, and we hope to help members also find ways to be involved that will fit with their personal interests, skills, and schedules. We'll put that link into the chat also. And our last announcement, we want this climate action call to be on your calendar every month. Elena will drop this final link into the chat. Our next climate action call will be Tuesday, July 25th at noon again. We won't want you to miss it. We will be taking action about electric school buses, and that link will be in the chat also. So many thanks to all of you for joining today, and special thanks to our awesome tech support team working behind the scenes of the Zoom screen here, keeping everything up and running. Watch your email for the follow-up info to share with others to spread our action. And we hope that we will see you again next month, July 25th at noon. Thank you.